Well, good evening. Welcome to this live stream on the 7th of January 2025. It's Martin North here from Digital Finance Analytics. Happy New Year and welcome to the first in our series of Tuesday streams. Over the next year, hopefully we'll be on 52 times or thereabouts. So that's the plan at least. And each week, of course, we cover different aspects of finance and property. And today we're going to talk specifically about crypto and the way that crypto is interfacing with the real world. And I think we're going to get into deep philosophical discussions. I always do with Adam. That's one of the reasons why I'm great to have him on the show. Just before I bring him in, let me just remind you that we don't provide specific financial or legal advice. This is the general conversation only. We moderate the chat, but feel free to throw your comments and questions in. And if you'd like to specifically throw a question at Adam or myself, if you use @WalkTheWorld, that'll get into my question queue, and that means I'll be able to see it. I don't follow everything that goes on the chat, always way too much that is going on. But if you do want to get a question, use @WalkTheWorld. I've also enabled Super Chat, which means that if you'd like to get your question to the list, or indeed make a contribution to what we do around here, always greatly appreciated. Don't do this for profit. Do this because we think there's a really, really important conversation to be had. So let me bring Adam straight in. Adam, hello, welcome.
Martin, good to see you. Happy New Year. And I'm happy to hear that I'm the first cab off the rank for 2025.
Absolutely. Well, we had to pick something really exciting to talk about. And I felt that crypto was worth spending some time on. Congratulations, first of all, on the fact that you called it last year. I know we had a show towards the, 2/3 of the year through the year. You said, expect crypto to rise, and it did. In fact, it's touching on more than 100 at the moment. So well done on that. You got that right.
I'm very grateful that you would acknowledge that. But the truth is, it's a very easy prediction. Once you understand the failure of fiat and the future of money, it's very easy to understand that Bitcoin's easily going to $1 million. I know that triggers a lot of people, but I've been coming on the show for many years and we keep seeing these milestones met. We can see the retail investors are in here. We've got 16 years of data. We've got institutional investment coming in here. We've got nation states investing in it. And now you have the United States government backing Bitcoin. I'm not actually sure how much more proof you need to see that this is the future of money. Bitcoin is the 7th biggest market cap on the planet now. It is bigger than any bank. It is bigger than any car company. It is bigger than any retailer. It is bigger than any oil production manufacturer or producer. So we just keep going up, up and away. And we're only really a 2x away from being the second biggest market cap on planet Earth, second only to gold. But we can see even the gold market cap is starting to slip a little bit. It's not really going up anymore. People are pulling out of the stagnant, boring markets of gold, the big, boring yellow rock, and putting it into the future of money, which of course is Bitcoin.
Yeah, and just on the market cap, so this is the total market crypto cap at the moment. We're knocking on 4 trillion now. And interestingly, if you look at the mix, so this is the Bitcoin dominance chart, it's about 53% is Bitcoin. So, there are a few other coins whizzing around the place. But interestingly, of course, Bitcoin maintains its predominant position. And you and I have discussed previously on why Bitcoin is, where it is. And we want to touch on that. But I think on the way into this, I just want to try and pull back slightly because there is, of course, the interface between the rest of the financial system and Bitcoin. And that's actually quite interesting now if you look at the way that some of the funds are now there. You can get ETFs, of course, you can get spot and you can get future ETFs on Bitcoin. Some of the big players are dabbling in crypto and quite significantly now. But the point I wanted to make was, there was the film called The Matrix, and The Matrix was basically you've got the blue pill or the red pill. If you want to stay in your existing environment and feel comfortable, then, go one way. But if you really want to start asking some of the hard questions, then things begin to look quite different. And I believe that the financial system is one of those things where many people are comfortably sitting within the existing wrapper, where you've got effectively a financial system protected by governments. You've got the central banks, of course, messing with interest rates and saying that they can control this economy by pulling the levers when they probably can't. You've got the US dollar, which is very predominant now, and a lot of funds flowing into the US. You've got a US economy where they're talking about a $5 trillion increase in debt and deficit over the next few years. Yeah, also a $2 trillion prize for cost savings, whether those will be able to come through too. And we've got more and more pressure on other economies, Australian economy, the Aussie dollar, of course, grinding down, putting a lot of pressure on that. So China's economy also as well. And then, of course, we've got the tariffs. So my point is that when you start unpicking this and thinking about some of the DNA of the existing financial system, it's not like we've got this safe, secure system that everybody benefits from, right? And over here, you've got crypto that is actually, other. The fact is that the existing system that we've got today, and we've had for the last 200 and something years plus, and probably longer if you go back, to the gold era and before, it's not doing well for many, many people. It's doing well for the few, but for the many, not so much. So I think that's a really important sort of point in the ground to start this conversation tonight.
It was a beautiful introduction there, because the reality is once you actually start to understand money, you realize that you're in fact, all of us, we're in fact part of the biggest Ponzi scheme in the history of humanity. So people get very angry at Bitcoin when they first hear about it, because primarily they don't understand about it, or they've been scammed in something that looks like Bitcoin, but it was actually some other scam disguised in Bitcoin. The reality is that the real scam is fiat, the US dollar, and all fiats around the world that are linked to nothing, and they just keep printing this thing to infinity. And people are now starting to wake up. The middle class is being absolutely decimated, because all markets that operate in market failure eventually fail. And fiat is the essence of market failure. You can't keep printing worthless money that's linked to nothing but violence. And what we mean by that is, what backs up the US dollar? Well, it's not gold. You might say it's confidence, but you can also say it's in fact violence, because we've seen that when sanctions were put on Russia, whether it's wrong or right, money must be neutral. Money must be hard, must be sound. It must be borderless. It must be censorship resistant to truly be money. As soon as you start breaking any of those parameters of money, people will break away from that so-called money in itself. So what we saw with Russia, and I give this example because it shows that if you think that, well, we can just control the way the money is working around the world by saying, right, you're oligarchs, we're blocking you out of the SWIFT network, we're putting sanctions on you, we'll show you. Well, all that did was make the ruble even more powerful, and in many instances, Russia even richer, because it simply took money away from the petrodollar, which is the US dollar, and pushed all of that demand into the Russian economy. Now, people were still buying Russian oil, and that includes Europe and Brazil, and of course, Germany within Europe and India, these big demands on this product. But the layer one product for all of us is money, whether we like it or not. In accounting terms, we look at money as being a unit of account, a store of value, and a medium of exchange. But money is also a language, and it's also a way that we store our energy and our value. Where it breaks, Martin, is I like to picture money as actually like a battery. I go to work, I do something, I produce some type of value, that energy that I've put into the economy, into my society. I then store the return on that energy in a battery, if you will. In this metaphoric example, if the battery is fiat, the charge only lasts for a very short time, because someone in the background is stealing your charge by trickling the value or the power or the store of energy out of this battery by continually printing money in the background. So many people get frustrated at tax. Now, that's a whole different video in itself, but the real theft for all of our value, all of our energy, all of our time, all of our output is the dilution, the debasement of fiat, the debasement of the work, the effort, the money that we've made. And what we're seeing now, Martin, of course, is that the middle class is being absolutely decimated. You have the haves and the have-nots. And in a debt-based economy, of which we operate around the world in, is that the haves, when there's a lot of inflation, a lot of liquidity, global liquidity put into the global markets, capital assets nominally go up. And we say, wow, look at all these people getting rich. The houses have gone up, the gold has gone up, your stocks have gone up, but they're all just nominal numbers. They're not real numbers. And we can prove this, because if I bought a house for $100,000 and then it goes up to $300,000, I can't suddenly buy 3 houses with that $300,000. So the house hasn't really gone up in value. It's just that the ticket price has gone up. If you take on a completely different money, a hard, sound, immutable, open source, borderless, censorship resistant money, you could actually have prices going down. Now, that triggers people who don't understand an economy that is not debt based. But what we could actually see in that instance is, in fact, our money could go further. You could buy a lot more with your money. Isn't it ironic, Martin, that we're getting technologically more advanced? We're getting societally smarter. We are living longer. We've got artificial intelligence helping us, and machinery helping us, and research helping us, and technology helping us, and all of these things that we've gathered over humanity to help us. And yet we're getting poorer. Why are we getting poorer? And it's so easy to understand. It's because they keep printing money. They keep diluting the base. They keep stealing our energy. And when I say they, who are they? Well, it's the people right at the very top, whether it's centralized banks or, if you will, the Federal Reserve, which is neither a federal entity nor has reserves of anything. They keep diluting all of our money, and people are now waking up. Now, there is an alternative, and the alternative is Bitcoin. But when people first started learning about Bitcoin, they got very upset about Bitcoin because it's like, oh, no, it's digital funny money. And the reason in my mind that they get so upset at Bitcoin at first is because they're actually waking up to being scammed, not by Bitcoin, but by fiat. And the debt clock in the United States is getting so great now, and Australia as well, all these economies around the world, the debt is getting so far out of control that even governments are starting to look at themselves. And this is where it's beautiful to see what's happening with the new United States government. They realize that the US dollar, any fiat can only last so long. This Ponzi scheme can only go on for so long before it all collapses. And now we look for the alternative. Now, some nations say the alternative is BRICS, where you have a group of nations. Primarily it was Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But now there's more than 30 nations involved in BRICS. And BRICS is saying, well, hang on, we don't like what you did, the United States, with printing too much money, delinking in 1971. You broke the deal then. You're going to break the deal now. When you put sanctions on us, you cut us out of the SWIFT network, you call us oligarchs. If you could do it to Russia, then you could probably do it to us. And by the way, we're working really hard to produce real value. And then you pay us in this worthless, printed to no end money. We're actually breaking away from the system. We're breaking away from the system because it's not fair, because you keep diluting the base, you keep stealing our energy, you're paying us fake money for real output. And then if we do anything that you don't like, you're going to cut us out of the financial system. So this is the rise of BRICS. But my prediction, and I put it out there before and I'll put it out again, BRICS won't work. BRICS won't work because it's just another fiat. Now, even if they say it's gold backed, and that's what they're saying, BRICS is going to be backed by gold. Well, we've seen it before. The United States dollar was backed by gold. And what happened in 1971? They broke the deal. So as humans, we have to actually ask ourselves and say, if we couldn't trust America, how are we going to trust 30 nations operating together? And even if they say we've got all of this gold in a vault, well, how do we audit the gold? Who holds the gold? How do we know that there's not a double spend? And how do we know that it's not going to be delinked later? So the alternative to all of this is to remove the trust. We need a trustless money. And the trustless money that we have at the moment, the only one we have, is Bitcoin, where people get bogged down, I think, with Bitcoin itself compared to some 2 million cryptos out there now, because the meme coin market's going ballistic, which I'm sure we'll touch on later, is that there's a big push to say, well, hang on, Bitcoin's too slow. That's not really the argument. The argument isn't, is Bitcoin too slow at the moment? There's going to be layer 2 solutions. Think about checks. They were slow. Think about the first credit card use where you had the clink machine. That was too slow. We progress. There's going to be no issue whatsoever. Where the argument gets lost for those who are already in crypto and they say, well, no, my coin's better, my coin's faster. It's not about that. It's about removing trust, a trustless money where I don't trust you, you don't trust me, we don't trust them, and they don't trust us. So let's just remove the trust and have a trustless, open, borderless, censorship-resistant, neutral money that everyone can use, no one can print, everyone can hold, no one can confiscate, everyone can be part of, and we move from a money of war to a money of peace.
Yeah, very interesting. And I would just want to come back. You mentioned, the idea of money as a battery, right? And that's a direct reference back to the Matrix, right? If you remember the story of the Matrix, people were plugged in.
I hadn't thought of that.
You're right. And the fact is that people were plugged into the system. to enable the system to actually survive. Now, I'm not arguing that the matrix is right, but the parable is very strong, right? People are plugged into the system to enable the system to survive. The system we've got at the moment is a system whereby we are taxed. We're taxed quite hard, actually. That money is then fed through the system. That money then actually goes into some services, although more and more and more, we will see that those services are being degraded. A lot of the money that's being spent by governments is being spent specifically to support large corporates rather than anything else. We've got central banks, of course, who are actually funded by government, who actually control the interest rate, but then flow back into government. So quite a few central banks were making profits. They're now not making profits, by the way. Many central banks are making losses because of the bonds that they actually bought and now having to sell. So the current system, the more you think about the matrix, right, the more you think, well, actually, a lot of the DNA of the current system that we've got is actually horribly like what the matrix says. We are part of the machine. Now, that's a really interesting observation because we are part of the machine. We're in the machine. Who's in control? So who's setting the agenda? Who's actually thinking about what's good for us rather than actually what's good for them? And I would argue that part of the problem we've got at the moment is that the big corporates and large financial institutions have an overreaching influence on the way that politicians think and the way, therefore, that the system works. Now, you mentioned earlier on, a lot of people are struggling at the moment, and I see that in my surveys at the moment. Interest rates are significantly higher than they were. One of the factors, of course, there is high property prices. High property prices were pumped up because of changes in regulation, because of the fact that banks were able to lend a lot more, which inflated their balance sheet, which means they could lend a lot more, which put prices up, which meant that people would borrow more, which put prices up. So there are more feedback loops. And so wherever you look, what you've actually got, if you stand back and think about it objectively, is a system that supports the system, rather than the system that supports individuals within the system. Now, once you start from that perspective, it's not like what we've got currently is working really well, right? The aspiration is to find something which could work better. And to my mind, the idea of something which is immutable and something which can't be devalued. And frankly, if you look at the value of the dollar, what you get for your dollars today is a lot less than it used to be. Tomorrow will be less, even more. And so what that means is that they can print a lot more money, but actually the price of things are going up, not because effectively the value of those have gone up. It's because the amount of money you need to get them has gone up, which means you could actually argue that it's not that property prices have gone up, it's the value of the dollar has gone down.
Absolutely. I recall when we worked together a long time ago in our early journey together on the cash ban, one of the things that you said was you were tired of politicians lying to us. And I keep thinking about that because you see it a lot at the moment with inflation. One of the things that really annoys me with inflation, besides everything getting more expensive, is that the explanation given to the people is a blatant lie. They say, and when I say they, we've seen both, we saw Biden do it and we saw Albanese do it as well, where they looked at the manufacturers, they looked at the shops and they said, it's your fault that things are getting more expensive. It's not that us who printed all of this money. It's not us who spent all of this money. It's not us who issued all of these bonds. It was you, because you went and bought a loaf of bread. You went on a holiday, which ironically creates employment, gets people off the welfare system, stimulates the economy and allows you to live. But the blame was put on us for spending too much money. That's not what causes inflation. Inflation in pure economic terms is the inflation of the money supply. Now, once we understand that, we say, well, who inflates the money supply? When I go and buy a loaf of bread, have I inflated the money supply? Of course not. I've just moved money through the economy. When I buy a new car, have I inflated the money supply? Absolutely not. I've simply created a job for someone who works in the car factory, which we don't have in Australia anymore. But I've moved money through the economy, creating GDP and economic stimulus. What inflates the money supply is governments through central banks and even commercial banks through fractional reserve lending, printing money that never existed in the first place. That's what causes inflation. And the lies that we've been fed for so many years, and even now, where governments, left or right, completely bipartisan, look at us and say, it's your fault, people, that you went to the cafe and supported a local business and created employment and stimulated the economy and had a cup of coffee. It's your fault that prices are going up. So what we're going to do, Australia and the world, we're going to punish you for, living and buying food and energy and transport and accommodation, because how dare you? And we're going to punish you by putting the interest rates up. Meanwhile, the governments are spending like they're drug addicts with a free open book to the heroin shop. And they're just taking more and more of this drug that is fiat, the free money that they keep spending, they keep blowing. And then they turn around and say, it's your fault, Australia, that you spent all of this money. So the layer one to everything is money, whether we like it or not. And the analogy I give to everyone is this. Imagine you're building a house or a building or a shed or something, and you want to build it on something that's solid. Now, if you put it on shifting sands, it doesn't matter how much work you do later on that building. Let's say I build a 4-story building and the building starts to crack. And the building starts to crack and say, oh, well, I'll put some filler in those cracks, but then it cracks more. And you say, well, all right, I'll put steel reinforcements on the building. And then it cracks and starts to shift even more. And you say, well, I'll build a moat around the building. The issue isn't the building. The issue is the layer one, the foundation. You've built everything on shifting sands. And that's what our economy is. Our economy has been built on a broken, fake, corrupt money that is called the dollar or fiat. It is broken at its core. It was never going to work. It is completely corrupt. All fiats always fail. And that is why, as you mentioned before, you're saying, well, we'll tinker around with this interest rate. We'll play around with taxes. We'll play around with tariffs. We'll play around with government initiatives. It doesn't matter. If the foundation of everything that you've built on an economy on is collapsing, which is money, and we need money, whether we like it or not, we need money because it's our store of value. It's our unit of account. It's our measurement of what we've done, what we've contributed that we can store later, move between one market to another market. That needs to be hard, sound, fair, open, immutable, and neutral. But the money we have at the moment is none of that. It is all completely broken. So here we are. We have all of these politicians, left and right, completely bipartisan, saying, well, let's reinforce the building that's falling to pieces by putting plaster filler in the gaps. It's never going to work. It's all going to fall down. And of course, now we can see that they say, well, what are we going to do? We'll just print more money. Well, that makes it even worse. So we have an alternative. The alternative is a hard money that is truly scarce and controlled by no one. More importantly, its value isn't determined by you. It's not determined by me. It's not determined by government. And it's not determined by a military. What it's determined by is the free market. And what's so ironic to me, Martin, as we get very philosophical, as we get straight into it here, is that we scream how proud we are of being a democracy, how proud we are of being free. Meanwhile, we have cash bans, we have lockdowns, we have the mad bill that was being put in, but all of it is actually around money. Now, let's just think about, if we're truly democratic, can't we choose the money? That doesn't mean dodging tax. It doesn't mean being a terrorist. And that's what the big boys will say. Well, you can't choose your money because you'll be dodging tax. No, if you can print money, that's worse than dodging tax. You're stealing from all of us. I pay tax. Then you dilute my money, which is an invisible and brutal tax that I can't claim on my tax return. You lie about it in your CPI numbers. You create havoc on the free market. You decimate the middle and lower class. You even decimate the higher class, because it's really the 0.1 percenters that are making all of this money. So we're all now in the crypto land. We're looking around and saying, well, hey, look, everyone, the lifeboat of Bitcoin is here for you. You are all welcome to come on board. But as you said, you're dead right with the matrix. Sometimes it's easier just to stick your head in the sand. It's just like, I don't want to take the reality pill. I want to take the fake la la land pill. But here's the thing, Martin. We can't ignore this anymore. People can't afford to live. We've got homeless rates going through the roof. We've got mortgages going delinquent. We've got banks losing money in themselves, which proves that the product is broken, because banks who issue the product, so to speak, and print it out of thin air and manage the product, not even they can deal with the product anymore, because the product in itself is completely broken. And here we are as Australians saying, Look, we've got this massive island that we live on. It's full of resources. We have heaps of land. We have some of the best oceans in the world. And yet no one can afford to buy a house. Why? How is that possible? When I lived in Qatar, a tiny desert island, if you will, but proportionately, they have less land per person than we do. The Qatari government would give land to all of its people. Could you imagine a world where Australia gives land to its people? But of course, we can't do that because we've monetized the real estate markets, a market that should have been for people to buy a home and live in. We've now hijacked that market, or the banks have, and they're very keen to lend out money for you to get in debt to buy a house, but they're not so keen to lend you money to buy a business where you could make a lot of money. How ironic is that? And now that you can see that people can't get into the housing market, even when they're cranking up the interest rates, which should make them more profits and slow down the economy, that's not working. So no matter what lever they pull, okay, we're going to increase the interest rates. Well, that doesn't really work. Okay, well, we'll play with the tax rates. Well, that's not really work. None of these levers that we're pulling on the economy work anymore. And they don't work because the engine itself is broken. Here we have politicians tinkering around with the steam engine, and we're over in our flying cars moving forward. And it's like, oh, well, maybe if we put better coal in the steam engine, this thing is going to go a little bit faster. Maybe if we put air conditioners in the carriages, the customers will be a little bit more comfortable in the carriages behind. It's like, you're tinkering with a steam engine. We're in flying cars over here. What are you doing? Come across here. Now, the consequence to all of this, Martin, as we move so quickly, is that a lot of people are getting stupidly rich. And you can see the majority of my conversation here with you isn't, hey, come into crypto because you're going to get rich. Now, the reality is you probably will get rich if you've been in the space as long as me and as many of my viewers. But we come for the Lambo and we stay for the revolution. Most people come into Bitcoin because they want to get rich. And I can admit that. It's okay. But once you actually in Bitcoin and you understand money, you're like, hang on a second. Getting rich is just a consequence of the most superior technology that we've had in our lifetime. Now, that might be a big statement for many people to understand at first, but once you've studied this for 10 years full time, as I have, on top of an economics degree, on top of building a real estate portfolio, on top of living around the world, you start to realize Bitcoin is in fact the greatest technology we've ever seen. It's the neutralizer. If you're on the left or right of politics, this is for you. If you're male or female, this is for you. Gay, straight, black, white, young, old. This is the most inclusive money that we've ever had anywhere at any time in our history. So once we actually start to break down those paradigms, who's going to lose with Bitcoin? It's not those who adopt it, as we can see the American government is now adopting it. How much more proof do we need? It's those who hold on to the old system, those who cling on to the crumbling system of fiat. They are destined to fail. And everyone here in the crypto land is saying, hey, you're all welcome here. We don't care what you look like. We don't care how rich or poor you are. We don't care what language you speak, what nationality you are. Everyone's welcome here. Come on board. And everyone who comes through the crypto door, the legitimate crypto door, not the scam door, not the pump and dump door, but primarily the Bitcoin door, all of them are like, I should have come here earlier. All of them. No one has ever come into Bitcoin and said, oh, this was a really bad idea. I should never have come here. They all come in and go, oh, let's look around. What is this place? And then they realize, oh my word, this is the future. We're here. This is our savior. No one ever comes into Bitcoin, makes a lot of money and goes, well, that was a good ride. I'm never coming back again. They all understand fiat is broken. Crypto is the future. Bitcoin is the pinnacle. Now, within our community, I'll admit there's going to be some debate where my coin's better than your coin and this coin's better than that. That's irrelevant for now. What we're saying, what you and I are agreeing on, is that money is broken and we now have a solution. And it is only a matter of time before the house of cards collapses entirely. It's already starting to fall down, but it is only a matter of time before the whole thing collapses and everyone flees to the exit door, and that exit door goes straight onto the life raft of Bitcoin.
Yeah. And, I think that as time goes on, more and more people would agree that the story of, the existing economy is one that doesn't actually support ordinary people very well at all. And so therefore, naturally, people are thinking about whether there is a a better alternative. I have to say there are some skeptics, of course, in the chat, as you would expect, right? And of all the questions, I wanted just to throw this one straight at you from Jason, because he threw a big incentive through Super Chat for me to put this up. So, Jason, thank you for that. Here is it. This is from Jason. Thoughts on ISO 2022-2, the KYC AML, which will be implemented at exchange level by current system law, while noting it cannot be implemented at protocol levels for Bitcoin. Could BlackRock, etc., purchase enough to vote for a change at protocol level and get control of the new system like they did fiat? Now, you'll have to explain the question, because I don't understand the question before you answer it, Adam.
Okay, so I knew this question was coming. Jason, thank you for your super chat, not to me, but to Martin. And he asks the same question every week, but it's a fair question. So let's break it down. So the ISO 2022 standard is an international financial standard that says if you're going to move money from this bank to that bank, you have this standard that we're going to apply to, that we're going to adhere to. There are many ISOs for many things. So I want you to think of even car seats in the back of your car. That's an ISO fitting. That's an international standard fitting where you can buy a car seat and plug it into your back car. And it's a standard where we can use a child seat in all cars of any brand anywhere around the world, and you plug it in, cool, it works. When it comes to financial systems, there's an argument that, well, okay, it's primarily pushed towards XRP. Now, there are many coins that adhere to the ISO standard of 20022. You've got XRP, you've got XLM, you've got Algorand, you've got Avalanche, you've got HBAR. There's a couple of others that I can't remember off the top of my head, but they are all coins that comply with this standard. The argument, or the counter, so on one argument, they say, well, hang on, you're going to have to use this cryptocurrency, primarily the XRP army will say it's XRP, because this adheres to that old standard. And I say to the XRP army, we're not arguing the same thing. What you're arguing, and it's a valid argument, XRP is a superior product, it's got low transaction fees, it's got massive liquidity pools, it's got less friction. And they say, well, XRP is going to be the way because it's got all of those things I listed and it adheres to the ISO standard. And there's no argument there. What we're saying to the Bitcoin maxis and those who are fed up with fiat is like, you're trying to fix an old system. We're saying break away from this system and use this system. This system it's the same for everyone, whether you're a bank, whether you're a government, whether you're a nation, an institution, whatever. It's all the same for everyone. Bitcoin is neutral. With the ISO standard, it's saying, well, according to the old broken system, when you're using banks and you're using what used to be the SWIFT network, we still got the SWIFT network, but it's a very slow and cumbersome system. Many people are saying, well, we have to stick with this old system. And the Bitcoin maxis, and I'm not a Bitcoin maxi, but I beat the same drum. I say, why are you trying to fix an old system when we have a new system? Why are you trying to tinker with a horse and cart when we have flying cars? Oh no, this is a steam engine. It's like, yeah, we've got the internal combustion engine. Why are you trying to deal with sailing ships going across the ocean with a better engine when we've got airliners that can do it much better? Now, it's not just about speed or transaction costs. It's about the rules of money. Who gets to print money? Well, central banks, governments, those with the most guns, those who are the most violent, those who are the most powerful, state-sanctioned violence, those who can put people in cages if anyone else prints it. Those are the ones who get to print the money. What we're saying in crypto is like, we get what you're saying with the ISO standard, and we acknowledge it. But we're saying we're breaking away from that. Now, you've got the United States government saying we're actually adopting Bitcoin at first as a strategic reserve, but it starts somewhere. It's like, oh, well, they're not doing it as a global reserve currency. It's like, okay, well, the US dollar wasn't always a global reserve currency. It was gold at one stage. Then you had notes printed against gold, and then it was delinked, and then you're where we are now. When it comes to the United States adopting Bitcoin, let's go back. First of all, it was just the retail investors. Then you had some big players investing in it. Then you had the BlackRocks investing in it, and now banks investing in it, and nation states investing in it. And the whole world is shifting from the old broken money to the new hard sound scarce money. When it comes to what BlackRock will do, so that Jason's referring to, you know, could BlackRock change the rules? And it's a fair question because many have said, well, hang on, if BlackRock comes in or a government comes in and they buy all the Bitcoin, won't that break Bitcoin? And it's like, well, no, if first of all, they can't buy all the Bitcoin because there's 21 million coins, 1.5 million are still in the code. There's 16 million in circulating supply. 19.5 million in circulating supply. We've lost about 6 million that we think we've lost. So that gives us about 13.5 million. Satoshi has 1 million. Nation states have hundreds of thousands. Individuals individually have millions of these coins. So even if BlackRock came in and said, right, we're going to buy all the Bitcoin, well, the consequence would be it would send BlackRock broke, and it would make me and everyone else who holds Bitcoin a multi-millionaire, likely a billionaire. So please, BlackRock, governments, if you want to go and buy all the Bitcoin, first of all, good luck. Second of all, please do, because I'm quite happy to buy a 30-story mansion because it would make me that rich. And I say that not being arrogant, but with the rules of mathematics and the rules of thermodynamics and the rules of supply and demand. They can't break the rules of Bitcoin. They can't change the rules of Bitcoin. And here you see that there's still this paradigm of like, no, we're going to tinker with this steam engine. We're going to put these old rules on the old paradigm onto the new money, and we're going to take control. It doesn't work that way. This is the first technology that's been very much ground up, that the retail investors have been able to front run the market. We've been able to front run the market for arguably 15 years. I remind everyone that the US spot-backed ETFs only came into effect last year. So they've only really had 12 months to now come into the market. And they are pouring billions upon billions upon billions of dollars every week into this market. And all that it is doing is giving them some exposure to crypto, but it's making everyone who invested in Bitcoin, including the newbies who are coming in now, it's making them all rich. It's actually leveling the playing field. Whereas in the past, the old paradigm, when centralized institutions and arguably corrupt nations got to front run the market, they got all the bang for the buck. Equally, when you look at how shares can be diluted, I'm not talking about a stock split, but when they actually issue more stocks or more shares, it dilutes the holdings of everyone who's got that share. Now, whether that share is a dollar or a stock in a company, they are still old paradigms that break the rules and benefit those at the top. Bitcoin doesn't work that way. Bitcoin cannot be diluted by anyone, and the code cannot be broken. And people say, well, quantum computing's coming in. Well, quantum computing at the moment can issue about 10 qubits of power, whereas Bitcoin is the most powerful network in the history of the world, and it's operating on about 100,000 qubits. So the delta between what quantum computing is doing at the moment and where Bitcoin's operating is essentially light years apart. But here's the thing, as quantum computing gets stronger and stronger and stronger, Bitcoin gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So it's a good question from Jason, and I know I've spent a lot of time on it, but did you give you a super chat? The ISO standard is an international standard for an old system. And that standard may apply, and it may have some validity today, but will that be so strong tomorrow when no one's using those old systems? And everyone says, oh, we'll never break away from film. Well, ask Kodak how that went. We're never going to break away from DVDs and videos. We'll ask Blockbuster how that went. And we're never going to break away from the gold standard. We'll ask the US dollar how that went. Things are constantly changing. And the only thing that hasn't really changed over our entire lifetime and beyond is the financial system. Now the financial system is changing. And it's a big shock to particularly those at the very top, because they're like, hang on a second, we've had an oligopoly or a cartel or a monopoly over this entire market for our whole lives. Now we actually have a competitor. Right, let's try and do our old tricks on the new money. And they're trying it, and they will fail. And in the process of trying and failing, all they're doing is making me and everyone else who gets into crypto, which is everyone, much richer and much freer. So please bring it on.
So I want to pick up one thing. You said there's about 6 million Bitcoins that disappeared. A few people in the chat saying, what? Can you explain that?
It's not that it disappeared. Okay, so the white paper was written in 2009. The first block was really coming out in 2010. So you've got 21 million Bitcoin buried in the code. And if people aren't familiar with this, think about having 21 million gold coins that are buried in the earth. Every 10 minutes, 50 Bitcoin in the early days, for the first 4 years. It's every 210,000 blocks you have a halving, but that's roughly every 4 years. So for the first 4 years, every 10 minutes, 50 Bitcoin came out from the digital ground, if you will, into the digital economy. After 4 years, that what's called a block reward cut in half to 25 Bitcoin. Then another 4 years later, which was essentially 210,000 blocks. It's just under 4 years, but it's close enough to 4 years that we go with that. The block reward cut in half and then cut in half again. So now what we've got is every 10 minutes, we've got about 3.125 Bitcoin being mined. That is the supply of Bitcoin being trickled into the market. Now, make sure everyone makes the distinction between maximum supply, which is 21 million, and circulating supply. Maximum supply is initially the 21 million that is digitally, if you will, buried into the digital ground. And the 19.5 million that's circulating at the moment, that's a circulating supply that has been, if you will, digitally mined and circulating in the economy. So everyone can see this. Everyone knows that there's approximately 19.5 million that have been mined, and there's another 1.5 million to go. So of the 19.5 million that we've mined, we forecast that 6 million have been lost. Now, what do we mean lost? It's not that they've disappeared. It's not that they've burnt. We can see them on chain because everything's transparent. We can see approximately 6 million Bitcoin that haven't moved for over a decade. And we speculate that that's because people have lost their keys, they have died, they have had their girlfriend throw out their laptop, and there's countless stories where this has happened. People have been sitting on millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. They didn't think it was worth anything back in 2010. So they threw out their seed phrase or their password or the laptop where the private keys were stored on, and you can't recover it. There's not a Bitcoin shop that you can go to and say, "G'day, Mr. Bitcoin company. I've lost my seed phrase. Can you reissue it to me?" It doesn't exist. And that's why this is a very powerful money, because just as no one can print it, no one can block it, no one can stop it, no one can seize it, equally, no one can reissue it when you lose it. So what we do know is that there's 19.5 million that have been mined. What we also know is that there's a maximum supply of 21 million. We also know that Satoshi Nakamoto, the founder of Bitcoin, who wrote the white paper, he or she or they hold 1 million Bitcoin that has never, ever moved since 2009, since the very early days. What we don't know is where those 6 million are being held or who's in control of them, because they haven't moved. But what we also know is that a lot of people have come forward and said, "Yeah, I lost my keys." There's countless stories of, people had $1 million worth of Bitcoin and then they lost the keys or they lost the seed phrase. They can't recover it. So that's gone forever. No one can remine them. No one can access them. No one can seize them. No one can pull them out of the code. So when we say that they're lost, we can see them there, but we can't touch them.
Yeah, and somebody made the comment that there's a chap in the US, I think, who's still trying to find a drive from some time ago, right? And that's the point, of course. And that's one of the things, of course, why people, when we remind people that you need to understand, the cold wallet, the hot wallet, and all those sorts of things, and make sure that if you do have crypto, that you've actually thought about the storage and all of those things, because there is no plan B.
That's right. And that scares some people. So the analogy I give you is if I give you a $50 note or a gold coin, probably two very different values, but if I give that to you and you're physically holding that $50 note or the gold coin, you're in control of it. You can put it under your bed, you can bury it in your backyard, you can put it in your safe, you can do what you want with it. You can throw it in an ocean if you want to. But once you lose that gold coin or $50 note, unless you have some very special insurance policy, you can't go to the bank and say, "G'day, bank. I'm sorry, I had a really big night last night. I got really drunk and I lost $50. Can you just give me back that $50? The bank will say, "No, that's on you. You've got to deal with that." And the same is with the gold coin. And this is where people grasp the concept of Bitcoin, is that although it's digital, it's on you. You own it, you hold it. And with great power comes great responsibility. Now, what's interesting, Martin, is that many people don't want that responsibility. And I say that's okay. That's the free market. My core principles is the free market, not a corrupt, broken market. So there are now many products out there. An exchange is an example. Generally, the rule is don't leave your money on an exchange. Don't leave your crypto on an exchange. But many people do. But then you have custody houses where you say, you know what, I'm not comfortable holding this Bitcoin myself. I don't trust myself. So can you hold it for me? And they say, yeah, we'll hold it for you. We'll insure it. But of course, there's a fee for doing so. And there's a danger in that if the company goes bust, if they are corrupt, if they run away with your money, if they are dissolved, just as a bank can and does do, like they block your funds, they go bust. You have bail-in and bail-out laws where they basically steal your money one way or another. It's the free market. If you want to be in control of your money with Bitcoin, if you want to own it and hold it and have no one touch it, you can do that. Equally, if you don't trust yourself, you can get someone else to do that. Equally, if you say, well, I'll hedge my bets and I'll put some here and some there, you can also do that. What's beautiful about this is that you now have the choice. If you contrast this choice with cash, do you remember, Martin? I know you're a young man, but maybe you can recall back in the day, do you remember you used to get paid in cash? Do you remember those days?
I do.
You'd actually get these, little yellow envelopes and they'd give you the cash. Well, now you don't get that option. You can't say to your employer, unless it's a small business like a cafe or something, but you can't say if you're working for the government, I want to be paid in cash. I'll be like, no, we don't do it that way. Let's go the other way. If you want to give the government money and you go to a shop front and you say, I want to pay in cash, multiple shop fronts, they don't accept their own currency. Australian government issues Australian tender, then Australian government shop fronts don't accept the very tender that they gave you, even though it says by law you have to accept this money within the nation of Australia along those lines. The Australian government won't accept its own currency in its own shop fronts. How odd is that? So this is where Bitcoin becomes more powerful. Bitcoin is like cash. Whether you want to have a centralized body hold it for you or you hold it yourself, you have that choice. But when it comes to digital fiat and you get paid in fiat, you don't get that choice. It has to go to a centralized body. Now, who is that centralized body? Well, it's a bank. And what can the bank do? Well, they can block your money. They can seize your money. They can say you're not taking $10,000 out unless you give us written notice and explain to us why you're taking that money out. They can even say, we don't even have any money in the branch here. We can't even give you the money. Did you see recently in, I think it was Lebanon, again, this is the second time this has happened that I'm tracking. A woman went into a bank and robbed the bank to get her own money, not the bank's money, her money, so she could pay for treatment for her family member that was dying of cancer. Now, it was her money. It was her bank. And she went in there and the bank said, no, you can't have your money. And it's like, I need my money. My family member's dying. Give me my money. And they said, you can't have your money. So she basically robbed the bank to get her own money. And now she's in prison. And we've seen this happen over and over again. And in Australia, you're seeing many people go to the bank and saying, I want to pull out $2,000. And the bank teller says, what for? And it's like, what do you mean, what for? None of your damn business. It's my money. I want my money. Give it to me. No, but by policy, by law. Whose law? Whose policy? We've now got to tell the banks what we're doing with our money. And of course, the throwaway line is tax and terrorism. It's like, well, guess what? I know about terrorists that I've seen on the news that has been reported to me by the mainstream. They're driving Toyota Hiluxes. We should probably ban Toyota Hiluxes. And what I also saw was terrorists. I saw a terrorist on the news who was wearing shoes. So maybe we should ban shoes. Now, you might think I'm being facetious here, but the truth is we keep punishing innocent Australians, good people who are doing nothing wrong, by treating them all like tax evading terrorists. So we force people to put their money into a centralized body who can block and seize that money at any time, who have bail-in laws, who can steal, or bail-out laws. Which one's, it's bail-in, isn't it, where they take your money from your savings account? They can take your money anytime they blow their own budget. And we're saying, well, hang on a second, I want to opt out of this system. Now, at the moment, well, hang on. Before Bitcoin, you had no choice. You had to opt into that system or have no money. But now in the free market, again, democracy, why can't we choose to use a different system? And the throwaway line is tax and terrorism. Well, if you want to be dodging tax, you don't use Bitcoin. It's all on chain. That's the last thing you do when you want to dodgy tax or be a terrorist. You don't use Bitcoin. That's the very last thing you use. What you use is the US dollar and big centralized institutions that we've seen in the past, big banks that have been proven to be laundering money for terrorist organizations. And what's the fine? The fine is virtually nothing. They make $1 billion in laundering money for terrorists. And then the government says, here's a $10 million fine. It's like, Well, that's a pretty good deal. Let's do that again. Because that sounds like the cost of doing business. If I can make $1 billion in laundering money for terrorists or dodging the books, and even if I know I'm going to get caught, I get a $10 million fine, even a $100 million fine, who cares? I'm making a lot of money. So this is where we're saying break away from the old system, use the new system, and stop treating all Australians like criminals because they want to have financial privacy. Financial privacy doesn't make you a terrorist. It makes you a free citizen. If I want to buy a bottle of wine or the Quran or the Bible or a naughty toy from a shop, why do I need the government to see that? Like, really, we have to think about it. And you say, well, what have you got to hide? And that's a throwaway line. What have you got to hide? Okay, well, let's go into the medical system. We've all got bodies. There's male bodies and female bodies. Why do we get physical privacy when we go into a change room or a public bathroom? If you've got nothing to hide, we're all people. Why do we do it? It's like, because we're civilized society and we're a free society. The counter to that is when you're unfree and you're in a jail cell, you don't have much privacy there at all. The same is with medical and privacy. If we're all people and we can all get sick, why do we have medical and privacy? It's not because we're terrorists or because we want to dodge up something that we're hiding. It's because we're a free nation and humans, adults in particular, and children, should be entitled to privacy. But somewhere along the line, they've said, oh no, you can have that privacy, but anything you buy at any time, anywhere, you can't have that as privacy. And again, why? Tax and terrorism.
Yes. Well, and of course, I've on previous shows mentioned the misinformation and disinformation bill and, the social media controls they're trying to put in place. And a lot of that, of course, is all to do with control. And I come right back to what I said at the start when I was using the Matrix analogy, right? The Matrix it underscores again that there are control systems out there, and there are people who actually have thought it would be good if people didn't say this or do that or whatever another. So what you find again and again and again is that governments tend to want to put more controls in place rather than allowing people to have more freedoms. So freedoms get eroded, and over time, people get used to the less freedoms than they had, and then the next chunk comes down and you look back and think, wow, well, now it's much less easy to do things that previously you would have done. And I think that's part of this controlling top-down sort of thinking that's going on at the moment. And I see it through the financial system, and I see it through the way that governments work. And, the point I always come back to, you've got to turn this on its head. You've got to put individuals at the top of the chain, not these entities. Entities should be supporting them rather than enabling people to do things, rather than the other thing, which is effectively clamping down top down. And by the way, some of that top down stuff comes from international, in some of these non-elected entities. And, somebody in the chat earlier on said, well, of course, there are people talking about, a global central bank digital currency equivalent, because that's going to be the future. And there's clearly a tussle going on between these controlled thought that says, well, we need a digital alternative to cash, but we can't allow it to be Bitcoin because Bitcoin is not controlled. So therefore, what we need is a central bank digital currency that we can control. And effectively, you are translating the old way of thinking into the digital world, but not actually solving anything else. And I've said on this show before, Adam, that to my mind, the tussle between central bank digital currencies and Bitcoin is one of the interesting tussles. But with Trump in the White House, I do think the game has changed.
Yeah, what you can actually see also is interesting is think about the centralization of the media and centralization of money. So the two big technological changes that we're seeing now, it's not rockets going to Mars, it's not EVs, it's not solar panels, it's not even the internet. Well, that supplements what we're doing here. The real power here, and that would be the layer one to it, is that we've now decentralized the media. That is, you and I are the media right now. We're not working for Channel 10 or Channel 9 or Sky News or Fox or CNN. We are two Australians having a chat with each other, and the whole planet can see it. I didn't get permission. I haven't had someone write my script. I'm not being paid for it. I'm not dependent on the centralized media to pay my mortgage. I am free to speak and therefore exercise different ideas. And how ironic that the government wanted to come in and say, well, you can't speak, we're going to put in the mad bill. The universities and the banks and the government, they can speak, but you, and the centralized media bodies, they can speak, but you, Martin, and you, Adam, you can't speak because democracy, I don't know, some random crap. But of course, the next part is we're seeing is that we're now having the decentralization of money. And these are two concepts that we've never even thought about before, because we always thought that the media were virtuous and telling the truth and they could be trusted. And why would you think any differently? Now, of course, when Donald Trump came in, one of the greatest innovations that Donald Trump gave the world was he bypassed the media. If you recall, many moons ago, when Trump first came in and he started tweeting, the media lost their mind. They're like, how dare this American citizen, who happens to be the leader of America, speak directly to the American people without going through us, the almighty CNN and centralized media bodies who get to filter and edit what this dirty, horrible orange man says. How dare he speak directly to the people? Well, now look at what's happened. All politicians have an X account. All politicians speak to the people one way or another through social media. You can see them having YouTube accounts, having X accounts, having Instagram accounts, having email distribution lists. That was something that just never existed before. The only way they could speak to their constituents, if you will, was through a letterbox drop or centralized media bodies, whether it was a newspaper, television, or radio. That was the only way that they could talk to the people. Well, now we can bypass these centralized bodies and speak to the people directly. And that's why people are waking up. And it's also why I'd argue the centralized media hated Trump so much. There was obviously, orange man bad, he's a sexist, he's a racist. That was the rhetoric. But what it really was that this man could not be bought by a centralized lobby group that was going to be given a script to say, read off the script, do as we say, we're in charge. You just are the puppet in front of the cameras. You then actually had an American businessman, a multi-billionaire who didn't need the money. He didn't want to be controlled by the lobbyists, whoever the hell they are. And he just led as a leader by himself. And the consequence was the media tried to absolutely destroy him. But the counter to that was that you have the internet of information where people could say, yeah, I don't know if that's actually true. And then you had mainstream media being proven to lie so much. And then you had citizen journalism, such as Joe Rogan, saying, hey, do you want to come on the show and we'll have a conversation? Now, Joe Rogan was a lefty who hated Trump. But ultimately, once he actually spoke to Trump and could create the platform, he's like, yeah, I actually am going to vote for Trump. Now, this isn't about Trump. What this is really about is about the decentralization of media, which allowed the decentralization of the passage of information, and heaven forbid, treating citizens like adults so they can hear both sides of the argument instead of a narrative that was drafted, I'd argue, by those who control the purse strings. You could now have the freedom of information. And when it was getting too much, Twitter said, right, we're going to stop you. We're going to ban the leader of the free world because hate speech. You can't speak. And it's like, yeah, that went too far. And you can see, in fact, what actually happened is it collapsed and the free market rose and they created a platform of free speech. When it comes to the centralization of money, that is now breaking as well. So you've got the decentralization of media and you are now having the decentralization of money. Where Trump is coming in, he's actually saying, no, he was one at first to say, no, Bitcoin bad. We've got to protect the US dollar. And that kind of made sense to those who didn't understand money. But now if you actually look at his equivalent of a cabinet, his dream team, as they're calling it, these minister equivalents, all of these congressmen and senators, they are the dream team for those who are pro-crypto, because they understand that no matter how much you print the US dollar, no matter how many wars you have to prop up the US dollar, no matter how many sanctions you put on other countries, the dollar is going to fail. Not because it's the red, white, and blue, not because of their religion, not because of what music they listen to or anything. It's because all fiats always fail. And fiats typically last about 50 years. And it's about to collapse. It's collapsing as we speak now. They're printing too much. The purchasing power's through the roof. The interest rates are up. People are living on the street. I could go on. It's collapsing. And so now you actually have a businessman who's saying, well, what's the alternative? And he's got his dream team around him, including his family, who are very intelligent. It's so easy to say, oh, they're just all evil. Well, put your ego aside for a second, put your emotion aside, and actually look what the family has built. Look at the dream team of those around him, and look at the innovation of America and the capitalistic success of America. They understand if they don't adapt to the new money, it's going to be the same as any nation who turn their back on the internet. You can't turn your back on the internet. You have no choice. You can't turn your back on the internal combustion engine. You can't turn your back on aircraft. You can't turn your back on penicillin. You can't turn your back on all of these innovations that continually put humanity forward. Well, the next innovation is the innovation of money. And Trump has come in and said, well, you can't put me in jail. You can't silence me. You can't intimidate me. You can't lie with the centralized media. You can't even put a bullet in my head. I am going to lead this nation. And consequently, the free market is now bobbling to the top. The free market of freedom of choice, freedom of association, freedom of knowledge, freedom of movement, and freedom of commerce. And that freedom of commerce includes a free money. And a free money isn't one that they just print to an oblivion, giving massive purchasing power to those at the top who get to front run the market, and then everyone gets the crumbs at the bottom, decimating everyone else. A free money means free of corruption, free of centralization, free of inflation, free of confiscation, free of all the BS that we've dealt with fiat. They have to adapt to the new money, or they will collapse. And I put it out to the good Australian people as well. You have to adopt this technology. You cannot turn your back on all technologies because you don't like them. It doesn't matter if you're scared of the internet. You've got to use it. It doesn't matter if you're scared of cars. It's part of our society. It doesn't matter if you're scared of planes. It's how we move around now. And it doesn't matter if you don't like Bitcoin or you're scared of crypto. You have no choice. This technology is here. The cat is out of the bag. Retail investors use it. Institutions use it. Banks are buying it. Nation states are buying it. It's being backed up by the most powerful nation in the world. How much more proof do you need until you realize this technology is here, this technology is now, and this technology is not going away? Get on board the life raft of Bitcoin, or sink to the bottom of the ocean in the sinking ship of fiat.
Yeah, well, I've put some arguments further up the show that suggested that fiat doesn't look particularly flash, so that's why it's important to think about alternatives, I guess. Now, one of the things I wanted to touch on before we close off is the ETF story, because the ETF story, particularly the spot ETFs, is actually quite significant. Here's a chart that shows that the cumulative flows, this is in US dollars for the Bitcoin spot, has risen significantly over the last 12 months. Obviously, some of that includes people moving out of grayscale into other ETFs. And the reason I wanted to put this up was because I think this is a really important movement. Of course, the SEC ultimately approved the spot ETFs. By the way, the new president will have a new SEC leader, of course, who is more pro Bitcoin and crypto than the previous one. But my question to you was, how does this impinge on the price of Bitcoin? Or to put another way, do the spot ETFs have to hold Bitcoin against the assets under management? Because clearly in the non-spot world, you don't have to do that. Think of the equivalent of gold. You've got underlying gold, but then you've got a whole lot of gold contracts and futures contracts, and you can speculate on those futures contracts without holding into the underlying. So what's the story with regards to ETFs, and is there a difference between spot ETFs and the future ETFs for Bitcoin?
Great topic to unpack. So let's first of all make the distinction of spot versus future ETFs. So we've got ETFs all around the world for lots of different things. A spot ETF, no matter, we'll go with gold because people can relate to that. A spot gold ETF implies, or is by law, is that the fund manager must buy gold, physical gold, to back up what they're selling on the market. That's spot. Futures is you're essentially betting on the price. You're looking at a screen and saying, well, I reckon the number's going to go up. So you can gamble, if you will, or invest, as they like to say, on the price of gold going up and down on a futures market. In a spot market, you actually have to, the fund manager actually has to buy that. Now, the same is true with the ETFs for Bitcoin. I should put it out there that we've had spot-backed ETFs around the world for some time. The big news in 2024 was that the United States finally approved Bitcoin spot-backed ETFs. As much as Gary Gensler hated it, and we're happy to see him go because he was the, if you will, the I was going to say anti-Christ is probably not appropriate, the anti-person for Bitcoin. And he was really stifling the innovation of Bitcoin and crypto development in the United States, the center of gravity of the financial and innovation markets of the world. As soon as Gary Gensler had to succeed, and I would argue that, or succeed, that the reason why he surrendered to the spot-backed ETFs is because BlackRock wanted to get into it. So who's in charge? I'm not convinced the government at the time was in charge. I'm not convinced that the SEC was really in charge. I'm convinced that he who had the most money was in charge. And that was conspiracy theory, everyone. Put your tinfoil hats on, just giving you a warning. For years and years and years, the United States was trying to get spot-backed ETFs approved in the United States, and the SEC kept knocking them back. But when BlackRock, who has more money than most nations combined, when they put in the spot-backed ETF, then it was approved. And because BlackRock had their approved, all the other fund managers had to have theirs approved, because it was not right to say, well, we're only going to approve BlackRock's spot-backed ETF, but we're not going to approve anyone else's. So what's happening in America at the moment, again, we've already had spot-backed ETFs around the world, but comparative to the United States market that gets to print all the money and is the richest, has the highest GDP and the richest nation in the world, until America got into it, the spot-backed ETFs in the world didn't really mean much. But now that the United States is in there and we've got 11 spot-backed ETF fund managers in the United States, this is where we can see billions upon billions upon billions of dollars every week pouring into Bitcoin. And then the weeks are different. It goes up and down, but aggregately, it keeps going up and to the right. That is putting a massive demand on the supply of Bitcoin. Again, the supply doesn't change. And you say, well, the big boys are buying it now. Well, all that does is makes the supply even scarcer. And what does that do? It puts the price up. And I can prove it. That's why the price is over 100,000 US dollars, and it's why it's going to $1 million. Now, I gave a price forecast of Bitcoin going to 100,000 US dollars years ago on this channel, and here we are now. And now I'm giving you another prediction. It's going to $1 million. And when we hit $1 million, Martin, I'm going to give you another prediction. It's going to $10 million. Because so as long as fiat has an infinite bottom, because they keep printing it, Bitcoin has an infinite top in price because it's scarce. So now you have the ETFs trying to buy as much Bitcoin as they can because their business model is to make money, and that's okay. But the best performing asset in the world, in history, it's not gold, it's not cars, it's not medicine, it's Bitcoin. And it's not slowing down. It's getting more and more money into it because it's getting more and more confidence. And the bigger it gets, the more secure it becomes. And the bigger it gets, the more people it attracts. And the more people it attracts, the more nations want to get involved. So this thing is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And now we're getting spot-backed ETFs everywhere in the world. And here's where it gets really exciting. For all the viewers out there, I'm really sorry to tell you, any viewers out there, and I come in peace. For all of the Bitcoin haters out there, and I get it, it's okay. I was there at one stage. Trump was there at one stage. Michael Saylor was there at one stage. Maybe even Mark North was there at one stage. The reality is, even if you don't like Bitcoin, you're now probably investing in it, because ETFs are financial products that are available not only to individuals, but to corporations. So superannuation funds, pension funds, 401k funds, they get exposure to different markets. They might get exposure to gold markets, medicinal markets, oil markets, tobacco markets, and now they're getting exposure to crypto markets. So what it really means, Martin, is that, first of all, the spot-backed ETFs are now legitimized in the United States. So they're legitimized everywhere else. But now they're legitimized in the center of gravity for money, which is the United States. What it also does is creates a lot of confidence in this product, because now it's not just computer nerds saying we think this is going up. It's now the biggest financial institutions on planet Earth are investing into this thing, and they're investing into it big time. And that's before we even talk about the United States investing in this as a strategic reserve, and other nation states will have to invest into it as a strategic reserve. But for me personally, the most exciting thing is everyone's now in Bitcoin. If you've got a 401k or a pension fund, there's a pretty bloody good chance that some of your money is now invested into Bitcoin. And here's the thing. out of all of your stocks or that your fund manager or your pension fund is investing in, what they're finding is that the best performing asset, it's not oil, it's not diamonds, it's not gold, it's not even bonds or treasuries or any other stock. It's actually Bitcoin. And so what will they do when they allocate a 0.5 of a percent to these funds? And they say, right, end of year report, which allocation did best? And they're like, Bitcoin did best. And they're like, what, as a percentage? And they're like, no, the 0.5% allocation to Bitcoin performed better than the 20% we put into gold. So they're like, all right, well, if it's performing well, double it. And of course, they're doing that. And then guess what happens? It performs even better because everyone's doing it. And it becomes this snowball effect that Bitcoin keeps performing so well. So everyone keeps investing in it. So more money goes into it. And this is where you're seeing right now as it happens, and that Peter Schiff is going to hate this, is that money is in fact trickling out of the gold markets and going into the Bitcoin markets. And it's not because gold is necessarily bad. It's because it's just not performing. It doesn't do anything. And everyone says, well, Bitcoin goes up and to the right. No, Bitcoin just holds a correction. Everyone says gold goes up and to the right. It just holds its purchasing power. And that's okay. Gold beats inflation. Just. And in some years, it doesn't beat inflation. But Bitcoin absolutely beats inflation. Where people go wrong with Bitcoin, they say, yeah, but in this year it went down. It's like, stop looking at the 1 year cycle. Look at the 4 year cycles. Because remember, if you buy a house, that's 30 years. In the olden days, it used to be 20 years. When you're doing a life plan, it's really 5 to 10 years. Business plans are 5 years, but Bitcoin is performing on a 4 year cycle. So it's so fast. So ultimately, the spot Bitcoin ETFs are just another milestone in the crypto timeline. It legitimizes the product even further. It puts a greater demand on the very scarce asset of Bitcoin, and it brings people into the market who otherwise didn't even know that Bitcoin existed. Their money is now coming into this market. It's going to get even bigger. It's happening right now. It's a very exciting time to be alive.
Yes, and of course the ETF managers clip the ticket on every transaction, and so they're actually generating significant income for themselves through the use of these ETFs. So it's the same, of course, with stocks as well, that the ETFs make it easy to manage your investments. But on the other hand, you've got these large institutions who have inserted themselves in the value chain and are clipping the ticket every time. It's just worth reflecting on that when you think about the way the structure of the industry works. But no surprise there, right? If you think of the rest of the financial industry, you had derivatives and you had ETFs, both of which invented by the big end of town to be able to benefit from more ordinary people investing, and they're clipping the tickets, and they're doing exactly the same now. So this is where I come back to this idea that the old world of finance and the new world of finance, they are interlocked, and they're interlocked at these critical points. And so you end up with effectively a number of entities with a finger in both pies, as it were. And that's an interesting observation in terms of the way that large players are now thinking about it. And I was talking to somebody who's quite in the ETF world, and he said it's interesting that a lot of people don't understand the difference between the spot and the futures ETFs. In the futures ETFs for Bitcoin, you don't need to hold any coins at all. It's a completely synthesized thing. If you have a spot ETF, you actually have to hold the coin. Certainly, that's a legal requirement in many markets, and so there's a big difference there. But I guess there's another question as well, which is that if you are actually tapping into Bitcoin through the ETF, then who owns the coin? Is an interesting question, right? What rights do you have in that situation? It's not the same as holding, a coin in a cold wallet that you actually hold the keys to.
Exactly. So just going back a step where you say, they're inserting themselves into these systems. Absolutely. And they get a commission for the purchase, if you will. And I've got no issue with that. It's a business. If I'm Woolworths, as an example, they buy cases of Coca-Cola from Coca-Cola, they sell the Coca-Cola and they get a little commission for that. Of course, they've got expenses, they've got the shop and they've got to run the admin, and they get a commission. And the same as when you're selling Bitcoin. The difference is, though, where the old financial systems are trying to inject themselves into these new financial systems, what BlackRock can't do is they can't front run the market like they do with many of their products. So they'll say, right, we're going to, as an example, I'm going to make a new stock called the Martin North stock. And BlackRock goes to all of their inside investors and say, right, we're about to release this product to the global market. Who wants in on the IPO? We're doing a behind the closed door where all of you rich people, you get to front run the market. And we're going to make sure that you get a big position in here first. And then we're going to sell it to all the retail plebs out there. And we're going to take their money and make you rich. You can't do that with Bitcoin. The other thing is, if you look at the dilution of shares, I'm not a stock split, but when they issue more stocks, you can't do that with Bitcoin. So what's interesting is when you look at these fund managers, yes, they are trying to inject themselves into these systems. And yes, they're going to make commission on these sales. Absolutely. And I've got no issue with that because that's the cost of doing business. But what they can't do is they can't change the architecture of Bitcoin. They can't change the rules that are the same for everyone. They can't front run the market. They can't dilute the stock. And consequently, they realize, actually, there's only so much we can do on this. But here's the thing. The demand is so great that the commission on clipping the ticket, if you will, or getting the commissions on the sales, that's more than enough anyway. So it's very exciting that, yeah, they can apply some of their old business model to what we're doing, but not all of it. And this is where we get lost on the ISO standards. Like, oh, well, no, we're going to put this old standard on the new thing. It's like, no, you can only put so much on there, because now we have an actual choice. Now, when it comes to, do you want a fund manager to hold your crypto, or do you want to hold your crypto? Again, I'm a believer of the free market. If you want a centralized body to buy this stuff for you, go for it. But if you want to hold the responsibility, also go for it. But if you want to hedge your bets and split the risk, if you will, you can also do that. Now, what's interesting in my world, Martin, is a lot of my clients in the crypto.land, nice little plug there, wasn't it? They're actually coming in here and they're building their own self-managed super funds in crypto. So they're bypassing what I was describing before, where, you know, you go to work, you get your superannuation paid, it goes to some fund manager, some super fund, and they manage it for you, and they take a commission. Fund manager takes a commission, and everyone takes a commission, and everyone's losing money. Well, everyone's saying, oh, a lot of people now are saying in the crypto land, why the hell would I do that? Why don't I just manage it myself? And that's where you have a self-managed super fund, and they're putting a lot of their money straight into crypto. And guess what? They are decimating their old returns. They are making so much money so quickly because the velocity of these markets is so incredibly fast and the volume is so incredibly high. And anyone who thinks, oh, that's a scam, no, just think about this. The stock exchange is open, what, 9 to 5, 5 days, not even 9 to 4, depending which exchange, 9 to 4:30, 5 days a week, 48 weeks a year, roughly. It's closed for public holidays. It's closed for weekends. It's closed for bank holidays. It's closed in America when a president dies. That's slowing down the markets. There's 16 hours a day during a business day that it's not even open. Crypto markets, they never sleep. It's like saying, oh, we're going to shut down the internet at 5 o'clock. Right, it's 5 o'clock. Everyone turn off the internet. Think of the amount of production, the innovation, the output that's done on the internet that's available to the world 24/7, almost for free. Then when you translate that into the crypto markets, not only are the markets open 24/7, and you can see the traditional stock exchanges saying, we better extend our hours. We can do it. We're rich enough. We've got enough people that we could pay. We can afford the wages. We better step up our game. And you can see stock exchanges around the world are saying, you know, maybe we should operate 7 days a week, or maybe we should operate 12 hours a day. It's like, it doesn't matter, man. In crypto, we're operating 24 hours a day. But beyond that, stock exchanges traditionally it's a $500 minimum buy-in. It's pretty much for the high end of town or the fund managers who are representing on your behalf. Well, now everyone with one of these can put 1 cent into the market at 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's why you have more volume, more speed, more money, more growth, because the on-ramp, the on-ramp's easy and the friction is so low. The volumes are so high, the velocity is so quick. And that is why we are seeing exponential growth. And even fund managers like BlackRock who go, well, we can't dilute the holdings and we can't fund the market. Who cares? The velocity and the volume is so high. We can still make so much money. Who's in? And then when the fund managers, as in the pension managers, the superannuation fund managers, when they realize that the best performing asset isn't real estate, isn't gold, isn't treasuries, isn't stocks, it's Bitcoin, they double their allocation from 0.5% to 1%. Then the next year they put 5% and 10%. And then they're competing with each other. And they say, well, how did that fund manager over there outperform us? And then someone like me goes, well, they put a 3% allocation into Bitcoin. And someone old with grey hair goes, well, I'm not, sorry, anyone with old with grey hair, don't worry, I've got greys coming through. They go, well, I'm not putting into that digital funny money terrorist. And it's like, you've got no choice, boss. If you don't invest into Bitcoin, our competitor is going to decimate us. You've got to put into Bitcoin. And so what does that do? That puts more money into Bitcoin, therefore it performs better. Then the old grey-haired boss goes, good job, Adam. We're going to increase your wage and we're going to put a bigger allocation into it. But my competitor does the same and their competitor does the same. And nation states are putting into it. And of course, the big one, Martin, as I end this rant here, is that you now have governments building this stuff as a stockpile. Just as we stockpile oil and gold, and some nations stockpile iron ore and wheat, you now have to stockpile Bitcoin. Not because you like it or hate it, but because you have no choice. You have to do it because your competitors are doing it. Just the same as when some navies didn't like the thought of aircraft carriers. They're like, well, we don't want to use aircraft carriers because we're the Navy and we sail the seas. You don't have a choice. Or some companies say, well, I'm never going to use the internet because I don't understand computers. You don't have a choice. And the same with money. You have to adopt this money or you will die.
Now, there's a very interesting question that came in from Sean a little while ago, which I wouldn't mind you just kicking around a bit. This is, sure. Please discuss with Adam how peer-to-peer use of Bitcoin systems beats banks using crypto when it all goes wrong. Peer-to-peer can't handle bankruptcy like banks can. I'm not sure quite what to make of that. But the question is, there are some differences, aren't there, between effectively those intermediaries and how they're playing it versus holding it yourself?
Yeah, okay. Great question. And thank you, Sean, for the question. So it's quite easy. Peer-to-peer means I give my money from me to you. Like you and I meeting in a park or at the cafe, and I go, here you go, Martin, here's $5. Crypto allows us to do that. There is a network that gives the, if you will, that called payment rails. The payment rails where I can connect to you, whether it's your phone, your computer, your wallet, whatever. There is a payment rail where I can move crypto from me to you. Now, to be clear, there is actually no movement of crypto. This is going to blow some people's minds. There is no crypto. It's just a ledger. It's just a ledger like an Excel spreadsheet or a book or a list of transactions that says, Adam had this Bitcoin, now Martin has this Bitcoin. But here's the thing, everyone can see the ledger. No one can corrupt the ledger. Unlike normal money with a bank, they hold the ledger. Only they can see the ledger. They can edit the ledger. They can delete the ledger. They can dodgy up the ledger. When it comes to peer-to-peer, compared to banks, when I tap my card at Woolworths and I buy some food, people think that they're paying Woolworths directly. They're not doing that. What they're doing is they're taking money from their bank to the FPOS terminal, to another middleman, and then the money eventually goes to Woolworths. Now, there could be as many, depending on who you're transacting with and what the distance is, literally the distance. There could be up to 10 intermediaries between you and the person who wants the money. Now, these intermediaries, let's say there's only 5. These 5 people aren't doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They're not like, wow, we're going to make all these transaction payment rails because we're really kind. Here you go. We'll do it for free. No, what they're doing is each person along the way, they're taking a little commission. They're taking a little cut. These are multi-billion dollar or corporations that make a fortune by you using their systems. And at any time, if those systems go down, it can be blocked, stopped, and seized, and it won't work. If you recall recently when we had this big problem in Australia where all the FPOS terminals went down, all the airlines went down, all these information terminals and information systems went down in Australia, and it was catastrophic. What the news didn't report there is that Bitcoin didn't miss a beat. Bitcoin didn't go down. That system didn't go down. It didn't go down because it's the most powerful network on the planet, even more powerful than the internet itself, because it's more secure than the internet. So what peer-to-peer allows us to do is, first of all, reduce friction. It reduces the friction because it doesn't have to go through 10 different people to get to where it's going to go. What it also does is it removes permission. That is, I don't need the bank's permission. I don't need the government's permission. I don't need Woolworths permission. I don't need the point of sale permission. I can just send the money directly without any permission. That's what we call about permissionless. But then when we speak about, how does this deal with bailing out banks? So the second part, let me just read it again. Banks can take your house. Can you just bring it up again there, Martin?
Yeah, hang on.
From Short Smith. It said, banks can take your house when it goes wrong. Don't know if peer-to-peer can do the same. No, Banks can take your house when it goes wrong because you don't own your bank. If you, you don't own your house. If you've got a mortgage with the bank, even if you still owe $1 on the house, just $1, the bank legally still owns your house. When I'm doing a peer-to-peer payment from me to Martin, my house isn't in the picture. My house has got nothing to do with it. So I'm not sure if I understand the second part of the question, but ultimately banks come in and take your house when you default on the payments for that house. And whether you owe $1 or $100,000 or $1 million on the house, legally the bank can take that house off you, liquidate the house, give you the change, and get their dollar back. With peer-to-peer payments, Bitcoin doesn't own your house. You own your house. There is less friction in peer-to-peer payments. And when people say Bitcoin's too slow, we'll just compare it to the Swift network. The Swift network is 3 business days. So if I want to do a transaction to you, Martin, in England right now, let's say it was a Friday and Monday's a public holiday, we're looking at potentially until next week until that money gets to you. And meanwhile, Bitcoin can do it in under 10 minutes. Most of my Bitcoin transactions go through in seconds with little friction whatsoever. And it doesn't matter if you're sitting right next to me or sitting on the other side of the planet. The speed and the time is the same because it's just validating a transaction without friction, peer-to-peer, straight through.
Well, Adam, I want to say thank you very much for sharing your thoughts again tonight. And as always, we could make this show 4 hours long and we still wouldn't cover all of the questions in the chat. But just before we close out, where would people go if they want to know more about what you do and how you do it?
I'm amazed we've already got through 90 minutes there. Before that, may I commend you? I've done it before and I'll do it again. May I commend you for sticking with your curiosity of how this works. It's no secret that when we first met, you were skeptical about this, but I can see over time, because you've been consistent in your values of remaining open and curious about what's happening around you, is that you've come to warm up to this a little bit. I don't think I've sold you completely, but that's not the point. The point is that you've created a platform for your people, your community to say, hey, this is one system. This is fiat. This is what we mainly talk about, the TradFi, the traditional finance. And here's an alternative system. You make your decision, but here are the facts, and here's the opinions. So well done to you for doing that. And it's an honor to work with you. For the viewers out there, be kind to yourself. I know this is very confronting. I know there's a lot of anger. Some are angry at me. Some are angry at Bitcoin. Some are angry at fiat. You've been subjected to a Ponzi scheme for the majority of your life. And many of you are waking up to the fact that the Ponzi scheme isn't Bitcoin. It's in fact fiat. And I realized, because I went through the journey myself, it can be quite emotional. It can be quite frustrating, but I sell you nothing other than a future of hope where you choose to opt in or out of where you are at the moment, without war, without violence, without any pickets or rallies. It's just a choice. And that's the choice I hope to give to you. Ultimately, if you would like to invest in crypto, protect yourself by getting real crypto through real platforms. You can do that through the crypto.land. That's www.thecrypto.land, which is my company, where you can do everything crypto safely on one simple and secure site. Buy my book, 28 Pro Trader Tips, The Art of Trading on Amazon, if you're interested in learning how to trade. Check out my X account. I was going to say Twitter, my X account, which is Adam_Stokesy. Or of course, come over to my channel, Adam Stokes on YouTube. We do 2 live shows a week, every Sunday and every Wednesday. And I also do a lot of interviews and deep dives into projects.
Terrific. Well, I want to say, Adam, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts as always. And, I want to say that DFA is about raising people's awareness of issues, particularly around finance and property, and thinking for themselves about what's going on at the moment, right? So I'm not a preachy channel, really, but what I do like to do is to get people who come on who have very strong opinions and allow them to make their case. And I think you've certainly been very powerful in your advocacy for Bitcoin in particular and crypto generally. I want people to also understand, because I'm a philosopher by training, that there is a context for all of these discussions, which is why I started the conversation where I started it, which is it's not like the fiat system, the dollar and everything else is working well for ordinary people. So it's not like we're standing on this wonderful platform where everything is great. And over there is this thing that's looming towards us that's looking as though it's a bit uncertain and different, right? The fact is that we've got big cracks in our current system. So therefore, when you think about alternatives, it's important to understand where we are as well, which is why I use the analogy that I did of the matrix, because I do think at the end of the day, there are going to be people who say, oh, it's too difficult. I don't want to look over the edge. I just want to carry on within the world that I know. But sometimes standing back and thinking a bit more broadly about what is really going on and perhaps what the real agendas may be, and therefore that might give us a different perspective on what truth is. I think it's really important, and that's what DFA tries to do. And so you'd be welcome to come on the channel again down the track, and we'll continue our discussion about the future of money and the future of crypto and Bitcoin in particular. And the trajectory is up to the right. We pretty much know that. You look at the trend; it might not be linear. It might go down as well as up over time. But it is important for people to sort of do their own thinking, do their own research. And we've put links and things to your various channels. So hopefully that will give people an extra line of argument. So, Adam, thank you very much. Have a wonderful year, and I'll look forward to catching up with you again in the next few months.
Thank you so much, Martin. Always a pleasure.
Take care. I'm going to take you offline, and I'm going to close the show. There you go, folks. Hope you enjoyed that. Always great to have Adam on, and always a provocative. And I know people will either love him or hate him, but it's important to listen to some of the things that he says and then do your own thinking and do your own research. Just say next week, Robbie Bywick's on. We're going to be talking about the agenda for 2025 and some of the advocacy we want to do there, particularly around what government isn't doing and should be doing, and the reforms that we need. So that'll be a different tenor on the discussion next week, but I think it'll be worthwhile nevertheless. And of course, I'll be putting up published shows in recorded mode the rest of the week. Please like and subscribe, just to say that I'm close to 70,000 subscribers. So I'd love you to subscribe and help me to get over that target. We've done quite well this last year, and hopefully we'll continue to grow and continue to share our thoughts about finance and property and all of those very important factors that are driving it. Thank you very much. Just before I go, I'll give you a little view of the doggies that are still there. They've sort of waffled around a bit, but there they are, still asleep, ready for lunch, and then we'll be going out in the snow and having a walk in the snow. Thank you very much for spending time with us today. Thanks to all Adam's supporters coming on as well. Really appreciate your coming into the chat tonight as well. And I'll look forward to seeing you down the track. This is Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics signing off. Cheerio.